I came to know Christ when I was 8 years old. My mom led me to the Lord. I was the youngest of 5 kids. I was raised in a Christian home, went to church regularly, and unfortunately, my relationship with my father was really tough. He's bipolar. He wasn't diagnosed or medicated till way into his 60s, and by that time, a lot of hurt had happened between me and him throughout the years. When I was 20, I told him I was going to go move to California, and he gladly bought me a ticket with a caveat that it was a one-way ticket, and told me he never wanted to see me again. The reason I chose to move to California is my life was way screwed up on drugs. I've been addicted to crack cocaine for the better part of a year, and I knew that the inevitable end to that addiction was either going to be jail or death. Neither of those were appealing to me. So I ran to California with the hope that maybe things would get better. And at least if they didn't, I'd be able to end my life in a way that wouldn't have a negative reflection on my parents, who I was still striving to please, or still thought I needed to please, although my behavior didn't demonstrate that. So I went to church out of respect for my brother, who had been going to a church for a while. I had no thought in my head that anything spiritually significant was going to happen to me. Matter of fact, I was really hungover and I was in a bad way. But that day, the sermon hit me totally different. The way the preacher spoke that day, I thought I was the only person in the room and that God Himself was speaking to me. I knew I had to do something different. I knew that my life was a wreck. That day, I knew my life needed to change, and I told God I was going to change my life. Slowly, I realized I was still struggling with things that I couldn't change in my life. Tobacco, thoughts, lying. Things were still a part of my character, and I was powerless to change those things. I thought that getting married might help me. I figured that if I was in God's will and I married a Christian woman, that He would have to bless my life, my marriage, and my life would change. Marriage only amplified my problems, and my addiction got worse. We didn't communicate well, we didn't support each other, and I found myself falling further away from the path that I chose to walk in. I was falling further and more distant from God. I was married for about 23 years to my first wife. For more than 15 years of those, we didn't speak. We lived in different cities, but we were both afraid to take a step towards divorce, knowing that that wouldn't please God. What we weren't thinking about is how the way we were living wasn't pleasing God, and that He wasn't mad at us, but He was hurt for the hurt that we were feeling, and that He wanted us to live in a different way. I was meeting with an elder for lunch one day, and out of the blue, he said, "Your testimony doesn't make sense to me. You've said that you were raised in a Christian home, but that you were addicted to crack by the time that you were 20 years old. That's not a natural slide. That's not what happens to somebody." He goes, "What is it that helped drive you down that path into that road of addiction?" I'd never thought of that. I thought of addiction was just a result of my poor choices. I was a bad guy, bad person. My nature was so strong that it was the inevitable course of my life, and I fully blamed myself for everything that happened to me. I could forgive anybody else, the harm that had happened to me, the abuse that I suffered, things that I'd gone through. I could forgive the people that did that to me. I couldn't forgive myself for what I did or what I went through. I married my wife Brandy 4.5 years ago. One of the outstanding characteristics of my wife Brandy is she would encourage me to address the issues that were bothering me. And she would tell me to go get counseling, go work on this, fix it. You're a good guy, you can get over this, whatever it is. When I didn't have hope, she was the hope for me that I could address these issues and change. 2.5 years ago, when I was on a business trip in Las Vegas, things got really bad. I hadn't anticipated drinking. I hadn't anticipated getting drunk, but I did. And I made some really bad choices. Unfortunately, choices that I barely remember, but I was aware the next day of what had happened and the suffering and the pain that I'd caused others, including myself. I now look at one of the worst days of my life as actually one of the best days of my life, because God got my attention. He broke me, and I knew I had to be sincere, honest, and He brought about real change in me in that life. Sometimes I think about the other misfortune in my life that it could have prevented, harm to somebody else or myself. But really, the worst point in my life saved my life. For the first time in my life, I agreed with step one. Realize that I'm not God. I admit that I am powerless to control my tendencies and do the wrong thing, and that my life is unmanageable. I never thought about being part of a recovery ministry, attending a recovery ministry, but it was part of my commitment to meet with my counselor that I attend Celebrate Recovery. I quickly learned how good it was to be around a fellowship of like-minded people who could simply confess, this is who I am, this is what I deal with, and this is what the Lord has brought me through in my life. And as we shared our time, stories, and had support, true commitment, true fellowship, and true change happened as a result of being honest with one another. 2 months ago, my mother, who led me to the Lord 45 years ago, went home to be with her Savior in heaven. I can say that I'm so thankful to the Lord that at the time of her passing, she got to see her son, the most healthy, mentally, spiritually, physically, and happy that he's ever been.